Hi folks, it's Greg here, and I'm going to talk a bit about Clip Studio Pro and why I chose to use it to do some of my webcomics. I started doing webcomics about a year ago just as a means to get better at drawing, to practice, to share some stories, to have some fun, and to relax. So if you're interested in using Clip Studio Pro, it's a tool that is used by professional comic book artists as well as amateurs like me. And it's fairly straightforward and easy to use. It offers a lot of tools that anyone who wants to do a comic might find handy without a lot of the overhead that you might find in a tool like Adobe Photoshop or Illustrator, and certainly without a lot of the cost. You can usually get Clip Studio Paint, I'd say around 25 US. It's usually on sale for about 60% off 3 or 4 times a year. So keep an eye out for a sale. I mean, full price for it's not bad either. Certainly not compared to a monthly subscription for some programs. So when you load up Clip Studio Pro and you decide you want to start a new document, you're going to see a window like this one where you can actually choose some default layouts for comics. So there's some page sizes. You can choose your page size, your DPI, bleed, or custom. And then I can choose this little box here. Lets me choose a template. There's a 1-frame template. There's 2-frame templates, 3-frame templates. So you can essentially choose a template layout that you want to use, broken up automatically into frames. So it's really handy, but you're probably going to have an idea of what you want your frames to look like anyway. So what I do, I have my own template that I've made, that I've built in Clip Studio Paint based off of the Kablam template. So you can download the Kablam template off the Kablam website. But just to show you what you're going to be doing, I'm going to start just a new regular page, no templates. Here we go. So this might be what a page of your comic could look like. And if you wanted to, you could have even gone and mocked up a comic. So let's say you've got this comic going, and you've got some ideas of where you want your frames to be. There, so you've got maybe a three-frame comic. So there is a frame tool that you can use to draw frames. So I went here to this figure tool into frame, and you can draw rectangle frames. You can divide your frame border. There's a frame border pen. So I'm going to go into rectangle frame. I should make sure that I have it as no fill inside the frame, which is what I want. So I can go and I can say this is a frame, and this is a frame, and this is a frame. So it's taken and automatically set up for me in my layers display here 3 frame folders, and the contents of those frame folders are shown inside. Everything outside, everything in purple is outside of that frame, or I guess in blue. I'm colorblind, I apologize. So that's one way to do it, and that's sort of how I do it. How I differ a little bit though is I don't draw the art and then place the frames directly over top. What I do is I will set up a page, rough out the layout. I know in advance how many panels I might want, so I'll do some quick hand scratches of the characters so I can get a feel for how it's going to be laid out, where the word bubbles might be, and then from that I will go and create a new page with some frames and then draw the contents inside them. So I do have a template that I use, and then I go and take the divide frame border tool, put my mock-up beside the page. In this case, I didn't end up using the last two panels. I get a little overzealous. And I would just go in, okay, I got, it is 3. And I would just break up my page. And I can use this object manipulation tool to adjust some sizing if I want. Go back to my frame tool and break this up. These ones I want fairly even. There we go. And I can create frames inside frames if I want. Now, the weird thing is that Clip Studio Paint, I think because it was designed for manga, kind of puts your frames in a reverse order. So it starts off in the top right as opposed to top left. So you sort of have to move your frames around to get them in a decent order. And then when you're actually doing your art, you would choose the layer inside your frame folder, and then your art would stay within that frame. It wouldn't bleed out. So that's how that gets set up. And again, I've got this one here that I'm working on. The other nice tool that Clip Studio Paint has that I find very handy is the text tool. So I can go click on the text tool, type in some dialogue. I change the color there. So there you go. I've got some dialogue, and then I can just take and very easily draw a word balloon around it. I can adjust this pretty easily too, and create a balloon tail. And in so many other programs, this is a pain. So click where you want the bend, click again where you want it to end. There you go. Dialog bubble. I can do whatever I want with these. But it just makes creating dialog bubbles so easy. They look great. The other nice thing I like about Clip Studio Paint is the ability to use vector layers. So when I actually work on the art for the characters, I usually take and pencil in sort of what I want the character to look like in the panel. Now this one's really rough because I just threw it together fairly quickly. So I penciled in what I wanted using a regular raster layer, and in this case I used a G pen with a 15-point brush size. That's what I normally use regardless. So that's how I set it out. And I'll take my layer, drop the opacity so I can barely see it, and I'll create a new vector layer on top of that. So it's this little guy down the bottom left corner of my screen. So I'll create a new vector layer, and let's go into Felix here. Should draw him in a little bit. So now these aren't quite as powerful as, say, Adobe Illustrator's vectors, but they do give you some flexibility. For example, I don't like how I did this here. I'm going to erase it. I have my eraser tool set to vector erase, and it erases up to the intersection. So if I erase this, it will erase the line right up to an intersection. So there we go. There we go. So it made it a lot easier to erase my lines. And if you see spots like this where I have lines intersecting, there I can go and just easily trim the end off that line. So again, if I had drawn the ear starting inside the hair, I don't like that ear anyway, so there, let's get rid of that. Do a different example here. So here's an ear. Bring his face around. And notice there's a bit of an intersection there. I can very easily nub that end out. And let's say if I start the neck over here, I can just trim it very easily. Gives your lines a nice clean look. It's something I don't use nearly enough. It's something I've seen people use, especially with the way that hair here is done. Makes it really easy to give yourself some nice clean edges to your lines where they come to a point. The other nice thing about vector layers, you can manipulate them like you can in Illustrator. So if I click on this operation tool, I can edit this if I want to. And there's some other fun tools here as well. So this correction tool, I can go and move individual points along this line if I wanted to, and bend the line out. There's a pinch vector line. So again, sort of very similar. So you can sort of nudge it if I want to nudge him into shape a bit. I can simplify it if I don't like, for example, again, there's lots of control points here. You can see how complex this line is. I can simplify it. I just trace over it. It simplifies that line. So now there's only one point, so it's a much smoother curve. You can connect vector lines, so I can join these two. Oh, that didn't work. So I think that's more for if I drew a line here, I could connect these two. I can correct the line width. I can basically redraw it. Redraw the width. There's all kinds of fun tools you can use to manipulate your vector lines that you really couldn't have if you're using a raster layer. So it's kind of fun. Makes things a lot easier. Makes your lines really smooth and clean. That's the other nice thing is if I go to this pen tool, I've got the stabilization cranked up. So if I drop the stabilization, you'll see there's a bit of a wobble up here. I have the stabilization turned right down. If I crank the stabilization up, do that same line, you'll notice how much smoother it is because my stabilization's turned on. So yeah, some fun things you can do there using a vector layer. If I wanted to, I could also draw objects just as vector objects. So there we go. So we have a rectangle. And just like those vector lines, I can do all kinds of fun stuff with this that I couldn't do with a raster layer. So it's kind of neat. Gives you some flexibility. And of course the word bubbles are also done as vectors, so you can manipulate them after they're drawn, change their sizes, adjust things. I can move this little connector. There are all kinds of other bonus features in Clip Studio Paint that make comics easy, but those are the ones I use most often. Saves you a lot of time, saves you a lot of effort, and they're tools that aren't in Photoshop. So it's another plus to using Clip Studio Paint over using a tool like Photoshop, and it's cheaper. If you use the EX version, you can actually have workbooks that contain multiple pages of your comics. You can do animation in Clip Studio Pro. I haven't done much in Pro. I think you can only do very, very short timelines. So there's the timeline tool down here if I want to use it. I don't really want to mess with my art right now, so we're just going to hide that. If you had EX, you could do longer animations. I don't think this is the ideal tool for doing animation, but it is an option. It is something that's available. So again, if you are looking to do some artwork, do some comics, give Clip Studio Paint a try, especially if you can catch it on sale, $25. You really can't go wrong. And play around with it. There are plenty of people that use it. There's lots of tutorials as well, so give it a shot.